Paleologou is a Greek visual artist based in London. I've known her since the 1990s, I think. Her work has been exhibited internationally and it's held in collections like the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Athens. Her book, Tales of Estrangement, has just been published, 2022, by MAC, a fantastic big colour monograph. And she has taught photography at our university, University for the Creative Arts, where she also studied for her BA, and the University of the Arts London and Kingston University. So welcome, Effie.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I will start by saying a big thank you to Fast Forward Women in Photography, as well as the MOMus-Museum for organizing this wonderful gathering of people and ideas. And the title of my talk, I will need a bit more light here, please. A tiny reading, no, up here, so I can read. Okay, I'll do my best. Do my best, yes. Yes, that's perfect. And I would like someone to show me my slides, there. How am I going?
No.
Oh, okay, fantastic. And my slides? You show me, I had them all before here. Okay, that's my...
That's the next, after the pomelo?
No, okay.
After favorite action.
Okay, first of all. Okay, I will start this presentation with a quote. It's a quote by Rebecca Solnit from her book Wanderlust, published in 2001. Women have routinely been punished and intimidated for attempting that most simple of freedoms, taking a walk. Because they're walking, and indeed their very beings have been construed as inevitably, continually sexual in those societies concerned with controlling women's sexuality. Throughout the history of walking, I've been tracing the principal figures, whether of peripatetic philosophers, flâneurs, or mountaineers, have been men, and it's time to look at why women were not out walking too. In 2001, I was invited alongside the visual artists Sophie Rickett and Ruth Bliss Luxembourg to show work at the Side Gallery in Sheffield. The reason behind our selection by the curator Natasha House, the thread linking all three of us as practitioners, was the fact that we were all women photographing at night. The title of the exhibition was "We Are No Longer Ourselves." It was inspired by Virginia Woolf's short story, Street Haunting, a London Adventure. Published in 1927, it celebrates the act of walking through the streets of London in winter as the night falls. I'm quoting Virginia Woolf now. The evening hour gives us the irresponsibility which darkness and lamplight bestow. We are no longer ourselves. As we step out of the house, we set the self our friends know us by and become part of the vast Republican army of anonymous trampers whose society is so agreeable after the solitude of one's own room. As a significant part of my practice still engages, although in a different manner, with both the city and the night, I felt the need to revisit and reflect on this past exhibition and ask questions afresh, wondering about the gendering of the public space, about the degrees of freedom of movement women have in the contemporary city at night. I will anchor this presentation around the figure of the flâneur, as it has been of pivotal importance to my early practice and research, namely the project Mean City, which I'm about to take you through, on one hand, but also because the notion of the flâneur seems to persist as a reference point in today's discussions about modernity and beyond. The flâneur as both an historical figure and as a critical tool for navigating the radical social and political changes that took place at the onset of industrial capitalism, altering for good the traditional patterns of class divisions, gender stereotypes, as well as revolutionizing the arts and literature's status quo. The figure of the flâneur appears and flourishes in the 19th century Paris, alongside the boulevards and the arcades that came into being after the demolition of the old medieval city under the supervision of Baron Haussmann in the 1850s. As a way of understanding the new perplexing, chaotic, and uncontrollable environment, metaphors such as the city as labyrinth, or the city as jungle, or the city as machine soon became commonplace. It was precisely under these circumstances that the figure of the flâneur, alongside his alter egos, such as the writer, the rag picker, the painter, the detective, and the prostitute, I'll talk if we have time later on, offered new ways of mapping the at once frightening and seductive modern urban landscape. The flâneur is the man of the crowd, the anonymous idle stroller, the observer par excellence, who is emotionally detached and therefore he can see and be seen, but never participates or interacts with the street life around him. Additionally, he is elegantly dressed, profoundly bourgeois, and exclusively male. But where are the women in this narrative? I'm afraid this is a one-word answer: nowhere. They do not exist. In her essay, The Invisible Flâneurs, Women in the Literature of Modernity, which was published in 1985, Janet Wolfs concludes with the phrase, "There is no question of inventing the flâneurs. The essential point is that such a character was rendered impossible by the sexual divisions of the 19th century." However, since then, the notion of the flâneurs has become a regular subject of discourse and revaluation in both critical feminist theory and cultural history alike. To my knowledge, the only account of a woman in the 19th century to have a first-hand experience of the streets of Paris unchaperoned was the author George Sand. The only possible way to achieve this was by disguising herself, dressing up as a man. One would have thought that a century later, things would have significantly shifted. Yet, here are the words of a young female poet in 1952. "Being born a woman is my awful tragedy. Yes, my consuming desire to mingle with road crews, sailors and soldiers, barroom regulars, to be part of a scene, anonymous, listening, recording. All is spoiled by the fact that I'm a girl, a female always in danger of assault and battery. My consuming interest in men and their lives is often misconstrued as a desire to seduce them or as an invitation to intimacy. Yes, God, I want to talk to everybody I can, as deeply as I can. I want to be able to sleep in an open field, to travel west, to walk freely at night." This is Sylvia Plath, writing in her journal at the age of 19. I'm sure I'm far from being on my own in sharing Plath's resentment for missing out, not only in terms of the big outdoors and the mighty manly adventures, but in terms of the nearby enclose. Ironically, a woman's whereabouts are compromised exactly at the same site, the street, that constitutes the backdrop of most men's everyday life, from working to socializing to pleasure hunting. In the early 80s, at the same age as Sylvia Plath, I found myself studying at a university in this very city, the city of Thessaloniki. My tiny flat was outside the center, and sometimes I took to walking back home, often at night. Although I loved it, it didn't last long. One evening, a guy, older, in his 40s or something, started following me. He pursued me till I started running, with him running behind me. Then, at the entrance of my block of flats, to my horror, I found myself pushing the glass entrance door from the inside while he was pushing it from the outside. Although I managed to shut the door, fear prevailed, and my night excursions came to an abrupt end. But not forever. In the early 90s, I found myself photographing the city of London at night, and subsequently other big cities too. So, I suppose by showing this body of work, I have so far demonstrated that it is not impossible for a woman to walk around the city alone at night. Yes, it is doable, indeed. But how? First rule, follow Virginia Woolf's insight in her street haunting story. Virginia, in her street haunting story, she doesn't find herself in the streets because she felt like having a stroll. She leaves her house because she apparently needs to buy a lead pencil. Of course, she's fully aware that the pencil is an excuse. A woman is in need of justification for occupying public space at dark. The equivalent to Woolf's pencil, my smoke screen, if you'd like, was the camera. It offered me the license to go out there to taste and explore the night cityscape. Here is an observation by the artist and writer Helen Scalway. In her essay, The Contemporary Flâneurs, published in 2002, she shared her experience, I'm quoting, as a woman who walks the streets, but she is not a street walker. She's telling us of how she had to overcome feelings of intimidation, embarrassment, and uneasiness during a relatively short, an hour or so walk in London in daytime. Here she is. For women, don't usually walk in an obviously purposeless way. They are everywhere, going about their business. Their badge of respectability, which is actually vital to their safety, is that they are nearly always either carrying something or pushing something. This pushchair, bag, case, letter may aid the necessary self-permission for the idle, pleasurable intention of going for a walk. Second rule, follow George Sand's good old methodology. Use camouflage. Dress down. Dress like a man. Be as much unnoticeable as possible. Invisibility is the ultimate goal. Indeed, I had already worked this out back in the very short-lived attempts of the nocturnal perambulations of my youth, the ones I've already mentioned that took place here in Thessaloniki. So, by the time I started photographing the city at night, I devised in no time a fully functioning outfit, intended to, at once, repel attention, and to provide storage for film and camera. It was a dark brown, oversized and shapeless waterproof coat, really something more like a tent. I would wear my hair up under the hood or wear a hat. Now I wonder, how does this compare with the flaneur's fashionable outfits? In my case, as a woman, I had to opt for cross-dressing, trading my identity for safety. Third rule, be alert as a hound dog, or even better, as a London fox at night. Trust your instinct. Read the signs for what they are, and be ready at any moment for flight. Forget the fight. A kind of a sixth sense is needed to navigate the big cities, regardless of streets or alleyways being dark, not so dark, or flooded with artificial light. One must always be on the move. Never be or appear to be a loiterer. So, what happened?
You went forward too many.
Where was I?
Next one.
Next one?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, who does the city belongs to after all? The realization that shook me up most back in my wandering days was that all the buildings I would see, all the roads I would cross, and all the pavements I would walk on, which means ultimately whatever I was photographing, had already been imagined, designed, and built before me, for me, by men. And therefore, whose needs, dreams, wishes, and aspirations do they fulfill? The same goes for our houses, the kitchens, living rooms, and bathrooms we inhabit. They have conceived and formulated by men, as have the laws that govern these spaces. Here is Rebecca Solnit again. Law. It makes women's sexuality a public rather than a private matter. It equates visibility with sexual accessibility, and it requires a material barrier rather than a woman's morality or will to make her inaccessible to passerbys. Do I read well, lock them in, lock them up? Arguably, though, the big city, predominantly through the blessing of anonymity, did open up space and facilitated by diverse modes of existing. It meant that both men and women could seek, explore, experiment with, or even invent one's own identity. The crowd, for all its negative associations, allowed for the in-between, for ambivalence and ambiguity, to such an extent that even the flaneur's experience as a masculine one was occasionally put into question. Here is Elizabeth Wilson from her book, The Sphinx and the City, published in 1992. There could never be a female flaneur for this reason, that the flaneur himself never really existed, being but an embodiment of the special blend of excitement, tedium, and horror aroused by many in the new metropolis, and the disintegrative effect of this on the masculine identity. He is a figure to be deconstructed, a shifting projection of angst rather than a solid embodiment of male bourgeois power. He floats with no material base, living on his wits and lacking the patriarchal discourse that assured him of meaning. So because of that, he is compelled to invent a new one. Nighttime has been most appropriate for accommodating the breaking down of conventions and stereotypes. The night has transformative powers. It is where danger merges with desire and fear blends with excitement. During the night, time expands, and nothing is what it seems. Still, for women, this remains the most tricky, scary, and better to be avoided time of being out there. Apparently, and I'm quoting Rebecca Solnit yet again, 2/3 of American women are afraid to walk alone in their own neighborhoods at night, according to one poll, and another reported that half of British women were afraid to go out after dark alone, and 40% were very worried about being raped. No, that's my last one. Sorry. Women have been and still are deprived from the pleasure of walking, as well as other pleasures of the body and indeed of the intellect. Deprived from the freedom of experiencing, navigating, and mapping space with their own bodies, which ultimately is the only way of owning a place, of making it one's own and be part of it. I suppose women have had forever to reimagine, reinvent, as well as appropriate and subvert their environments, whether it be the city, town, village, or home, as best as they can, so to make their mark and claim agency. Now, while visiting the show Women in Revolt, that was held recently at Tate Britain in London, I spotted a poster made in the 1980s by the Lenthal Road Workshop, a printing group set up by Women's Collective in 1975 in Hackney. I knew straight away, right there and then, which would be the final slide for this presentation. It is called Sweep Men of the Streets. So, to conclude, can we finally talk? Not sure, not yet. I'm afraid the visible flâneur is still in the making. The visible flâneur is a work in progress. Thank you. Ευχαριστώ.